The mop made the same sound it always did. A wet drag across the marble floor, back and forth. Back and forth. Elena had been doing this for 15 years now. 15 years of pushing a cleaning cart through the same hallways, emptying the same trash cans, wiping down the same windows. She knew every corner of the Hartwell Conservatory of Music better than anyone. She knew which doors squeaked, which lights flickered, and which bathroom faucets dripped at night when everything went quiet. But nobody knew her. To the students who walked past her every day, she was invisible. To the professors in their fancy suits and expensive shoes, she was just part of the building. Like a wall, like a chair, something that existed in the background but never really mattered. They never said hello. They never asked her name. They never wondered if she had a story of her own, and Elena never expected them to. She was 59 years old. Her hair had turned gray at the temples, and her hands were rough from years of scrubbing and lifting. She wore the same gray uniform every day, with the conservatory logo stitched on the front pocket. When she looked in the mirror each morning, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. That woman looked tired. That woman looked like someone whose dreams had been folded up and put away in a box a long time ago. But there was something those students and professors did not know. Something Elena kept hidden deep inside her heart, locked away like a secret she was too afraid to share. She could play the piano, not just play it, she could make it sing. Back in Venezuela, where she was born and raised, Elena had been a different person. She had been young and full of fire. Her fingers had danced across piano keys since she was 5 years old, and by the time she was 15, people in her town called her a gift from God. Her mother used to sit in the corner of their small living room and cry whenever Elena played. Not sad tears, happy ones. Proud ones. The kind of tears that come when you watch someone you love do something beautiful. Elena studied at the finest music academy in Caracas. Her teachers said she had something rare, something that could not be taught. They said her playing came from a place deeper than technique. It came from her soul. By the time she was 22, she was preparing for her first international competition. Scouts from Europe had already started paying attention. Everyone said it was only a matter of time before the world knew her name. But life does not always follow the path we plan for it. The political situation in Venezuela changed almost overnight. The streets became dangerous. People disappeared. Families were torn apart. Elena's father lost his job. And then he lost his hope. Her mother got sick from the stress and worry. The music academy closed its doors. The dream that had seemed so close suddenly felt like it belonged to another lifetime. When Elena was 25, her family made the hardest decision of their lives. They left everything behind. Their home, their friends, their memories. They packed 2 suitcases and boarded a plane to the United States, not knowing what waited for them on the other side. What waited was survival. Elena's father worked construction until his back gave out. Her mother cleaned hotel rooms until her hands shook too much to fold the sheets. And Elena did whatever she could to help. She worked at a laundromat. She washed dishes at a restaurant. She babysat children in the neighborhood. There was no time for music. There was no room for dreams. There was only the next bill, the next rent payment, the next meal to put on the table. Years passed. Her father died of a heart attack when she was 34. Her mother followed him 3 years later, slipping away quietly in her sleep. Elena was alone now. No husband, no children, just herself and the silence that filled her small apartment every night. She found the job at the conservatory almost by accident. A friend of a friend mentioned they were hiring cleaning staff. Elena applied because she needed the money. But from the moment she walked through those doors, something inside her broke open. The sound of music was everywhere. It floated through the hallways like a ghost. It leaked out from under practice room doors. It echoed in the concert halls where students rehearsed for recitals. Every note reminded Elena of who she used to be. Every melody whispered her name in a language she had tried so hard to forget. At first, it was painful. She would push her cart past a practice room and hear a student struggling with a piece she had mastered at age 12. She would watch young musicians complain about their lessons, not realizing how lucky they were to have this life. She wanted to scream at them. She wanted to shake them and say, "Do you know what I would give to trade places with you?" But she never said a word. She just kept her head down and did her job. The professors were the hardest to be around. They walked through the halls like royalty, discussing technique and interpretation as if these things were more important than breathing. They never looked at Elena. Not once. To them, she was furniture, a cleaning woman with a mop and a cart, barely worth a glance. There was one professor in particular who made Elena's heart ache every time she saw him. He taught advanced piano studies, and his students worshipped him. He would stand in the doorway of his classroom, arms crossed, lecturing about passion and precision and the sacred duty of an artist. Elena would mop the floor nearby and listen to every word. She wanted to tell him that she understood. She wanted to tell him that she had once felt that fire too. But what would she say? Who would believe her? She was just the cleaning lady. She had no proof of the life she had left behind. No recordings. No awards. Nothing but memories that felt more like dreams with each passing year. And so Elena stayed silent. But late at night, when the building emptied and the hallways grew dark, something changed. Elena would finish her shift and make her way to the main recital hall. It was a beautiful room with velvet seats and golden curtains and a ceiling painted with angels. In the center of the stage sat a grand piano. A Steinway. The most beautiful instrument Elena had ever seen. She never played it. She was too afraid. Too convinced that her fingers had forgotten everything. Too certain that if she tried and failed, it would destroy her completely. But she would sit on the bench. Just sit there, in the darkness, with her hands resting on the keys. She would close her eyes and remember. She would remember her mother crying in the corner of their living room. She would remember her teachers telling her she was destined for greatness. She would remember the girl she used to be, before the world took everything away. Sometimes, she would press a single key. Just one note, hanging in the silence like a question without an answer. And then, she would pull her hands back, stand up, and walk away. This was her ritual, her secret, her private moment of grief and longing. For 15 years, Elena lived between two worlds. By day, she was invisible. By night, she sat with her ghosts. No one knew. No one suspected. No one imagined that the quiet woman with the mop and the gray uniform carried a symphony inside her heart. But secrets have a way of finding the light. And Elena's secret was about to change everything. It was a cold evening in March when everything started to shift. The kind of evening where the wind cut through your coat and the sky turned that deep purple color just before nightfall. Elena was pushing her cart down the third-floor hallway, same as always, when she noticed something unusual. People were panicking. Not regular stress. Real panic. The kind that makes people speak too fast and wave their hands around like they are trying to grab something out of the air. Elena slowed down and watched from the corner of her eye. 3 professors stood in a tight circle near the administration office. Their voices were low but urgent. One of them kept shaking his head. Another one had her phone pressed to her ear, pacing back and forth. Elena knew better than to get involved. She was invisible, remember? Nobody wanted her opinion. Nobody asked the cleaning lady what she thought about anything. So she kept pushing her cart, kept her head down, and minded her own business. But she listened. She always listened. From what she could piece together, something had gone very wrong. The spring gala was only 5 days away. This was the biggest event of the year for the conservatory. Rich donors came from all over the country to write big checks and feel good about supporting the arts. Students performed. Professors gave speeches. It was the night that kept the lights on and the doors open, and the star of the show had just broken her wrist. The student who was supposed to perform the featured piano piece had fallen during a hiking trip over the weekend. Her right wrist was fractured in 2 places. She would not be playing anything for at least 2 months. The professors were in crisis mode. They needed a replacement, and they needed one fast. Elena felt something stir in her chest when she heard this. A strange flutter, like a bird trapped behind her ribs. She pushed it down and kept walking. This was not her problem. This was not her world. She had no place in any of this. But the universe had other plans. 3 nights later, Elena was finishing her shift around 11:30. The building was almost empty. Most of the students had gone home. The professors had left hours ago. Only the security guard remained, sitting in his booth near the front entrance, scrolling through his phone like he did every night. Elena made her way to the recital hall. Her legs carried her there without thinking, the way they always did. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The room was dark except for the emergency exit signs glowing red in the corners. The grand piano sat on the stage like a sleeping giant, waiting for someone to wake it up. She walked slowly down the aisle between the velvet seats. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. When she reached the stage, she climbed the small set of stairs and stood in front of the piano. The Steinway, her old friend, her silent companion for all these years, tonight felt different. She did not know why. Maybe it was the conversation she had overheard. Maybe it was the memory of that young student with the broken wrist. Her dreams suddenly put on hold. Maybe it was the weight of 15 years pressing down on Elena's shoulders, heavier than ever before. She sat down on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys, and for the first time in almost 2 decades, she played. The first notes came out shaky, uncertain, like a voice that had not spoken in years trying to remember how to form words. But then, something clicked. Her fingers found their rhythm. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The music poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. She played Chopin. The Ballade, No. 1-inch G minor. It was the piece she had been preparing for her international competition all those years ago. The piece that was supposed to launch her career. The piece that had been locked inside her for so long she thought it had disappeared forever. But it had not disappeared. It had been waiting. Elena played with her eyes closed. Tears streamed down her face. But she did not stop. She played through the pain, through the grief, through all the years of silence and invisibility. She played for her mother, who used to cry in the corner of their living room. She played for her father, who worked himself to death so his family could survive. She played for the girl she used to be, the one with fire in her heart and the whole world ahead of her. When the final note faded into silence, Elena sat perfectly still. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were trembling. She felt emptied out and filled up at the same time, like she had just run a marathon and crossed the finish line. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps. Someone was in the room. Elena spun around on the bench, her eyes searching the darkness. There, near the back of the hall, a figure stood in the shadows. It was a young man, a student. She recognized him vaguely. He was one of the piano students, the serious ones who practiced late into the night. He must have been in one of the practice rooms when she started playing. He had heard everything. Elena's chest tightened with fear. What would he think? What would he say? Would he laugh at her? Would he tell everyone that the cleaning lady thought she could play piano? But the young man did not laugh. He did not smirk or roll his eyes. He just stood there, staring at her with an expression she could not read. Then he spoke. That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. Elena did not know what to say. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The young man walked slowly down the aisle toward the stage. His footsteps were soft, almost hesitant, like he was approaching something sacred. How long have you been able to play like that? He asked. Elena swallowed hard. A long time, she whispered. A very long time. The young man shook his head in disbelief. Why does nobody know about this? Why are you not teaching here? Why are you not performing? Elena looked down at her hands. The same hands that had just created something beautiful. The same hands that spent their days scrubbing floors and emptying trash. Life is complicated, she said quietly. Sometimes dreams get lost along the way. The young man was silent for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. The gala. They need someone to play. The featured student broke her wrist. Everyone is panicking because there is no replacement. He paused. His eyes locked on hers. You could do it. Elena almost laughed. Me? I am the cleaning lady. They would never let me perform. They would, if they heard you play. Nobody wants to hear me play. Nobody even knows I exist. The young man took another step forward. I know you exist. I just heard you. And I am telling you, what you just did on that piano was better than anything I have heard in 3 years at this school. Better than the professors. Better than the students. Better than anyone. Elena felt her heart beating in her throat. This was crazy. This was impossible. She had spent 15 years being invisible, and now this young man was asking her to step into the spotlight? I cannot, she said, shaking her head. I am too old. It has been too long. I would embarrass myself, the young man smiled gently. Or you would remind everyone what real music sounds like. He did not push any further. He simply nodded, turned around, and walked out of the recital hall. Elena sat alone on the stage, her mind spinning, her heart torn between fear and something else, something she had not felt in years. Hope. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Elena was restocking cleaning supplies in a storage closet when the door opened behind her. She turned around and found herself face to face with the director of the conservatory. A woman named Dr. Chen, known for her sharp eyes and no-nonsense attitude. Are you Elena Vasquez? She asked. Elena nodded slowly, her stomach tightening. Dr. Chen studied her for a long moment. Then she spoke words that Elena never expected to hear. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. Elena held her breath. Can you play the piano? The question hung in the air between them. Elena thought about lying. She thought about shaking her head and going back to her mops and buckets and invisible life. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the young man's words from the night before. Maybe it was the memory of how it felt to finally play again. Maybe it was the ghost of her mother. Watching from somewhere far away, she looked Dr. Chen straight in the eye. Yes, she said. I can play. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Then I have a proposal for you. And just like that, Elena's invisible life was about to become very visible indeed. The 5 days before the gala passed like a fever dream. Elena could barely remember them afterward. Everything blurred together. The conversations with Dr. Chen, the late-night practice sessions in empty classrooms, the doubt that crept into her mind every single morning when she woke up and thought about what she had agreed to do. What was she thinking? She was a cleaning lady. A 59-year-old woman who had not performed in front of an audience in nearly 2 decades. The last time she played for anyone other than herself. She had been a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Now she had gray hair and tired eyes and hands that knew more about scrubbing toilets than playing concertos. But Dr. Chen would not let her back out. Every time Elena tried to change her mind, the director would shake her head and say the same thing. I heard you play. I stood outside that practice room for 10 minutes and listened. You are exactly what this gala needs. Elena did not understand it. Dr. Chen was a serious woman. A practical woman. She did not seem like the type to take risks on cleaning ladies with secret talents. But there was something in her eyes when she talked about Elena's music. Something soft and almost sad. Like she understood something that Elena herself could not see. So Elena practiced. Every night after her shift, she would sneak into one of the smaller practice rooms and play until her fingers ached. She chose a piece by Liszt. Liebestrom No. 3. It meant, dream of love in German. And it had always been one of her favorites. Her mother used to request it every Sunday evening back in Venezuela. Elena would play, and her mother would close her eyes and sway gently in her chair, lost in the music. Playing it now felt like talking to her mother again. Like reaching across time and space to touch something that had been taken away too soon. The night of the gala arrived faster than Elena was ready for. She stood in a small dressing room backstage, staring at herself in the mirror. Dr. Chen had arranged for her to borrow a simple black dress from one of the professors. It fit well enough, though Elena felt strange wearing something so elegant. She kept tugging at the sleeves, adjusting the neckline, trying to recognize the woman looking back at her. She could hear the guests arriving. The murmur of voices. The clink of champagne glasses. The polite laughter of people who had money and power. and belonged in places like this. Elena did not belong. She knew that. Everyone out there would know it too the moment she walked onto that stage. A knock came at the door. It was Dr. Chen. "It is almost time," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" Elena let out a shaky breath. Terrified. Dr. Chen smiled. "Good. That means you care." She stepped closer and placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Listen to me. Those people out there, they think they know what talent looks like. They think it comes with degrees and awards and fancy last names. Tonight, you are going to show them something different. You are going to show them that talent does not care about any of that. It lives where it wants to live." Elena nodded, but her hands would not stop trembling. A few minutes later, she stood in the wings of the stage, hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain. She could see the grand hall through a small gap in the fabric. It was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting golden light across everything. Tables draped in white linen filled the floor. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns sat sipping wine and chatting with each other. There must have been 200 people out there, maybe more. Elena's stomach turned. She thought she might be sick. Then she heard Dr. Chen's voice through the speakers. The director had taken the stage to introduce the evening's program. She talked about the conservatory's mission. She thanked the donors for their support. She mentioned the unfortunate injury of the student who was supposed to perform tonight. "But," Dr. Chen continued, "sometimes unexpected circumstances lead us to unexpected discoveries. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing a very special guest. Someone whose talent has been hidden from the world for far too long. Please welcome her to the stage." That was the cue. Elena's feet felt like they were made of concrete. She could not move. She could not breathe. The curtain seemed like a wall, and on the other side was everything she had been running from for 18 years. But then she thought of her mother. She thought of her father. She thought of the little girl in Caracas who used to dream of concert halls just like this one. That girl was still inside her somewhere. That girl had never stopped believing. Even when Elena had given up. She stepped through the curtain. The first thing she noticed was the silence. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward her at once. Then came the whispers. She could not hear the exact words, but she could guess what they were saying. "Is that the cleaning lady? Why is she on stage? What is happening?" A man near the front leaned toward the woman beside him and said something that made her eyebrows rise. A group of students near the back exchanged confused glances. One of them actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that cut through the room like a knife. Elena kept walking. Her legs carried her forward even though every part of her wanted to turn around and run. She reached the piano. The Steinway Grand, the same instrument she had been sitting with in the darkness for 15 years. Only now it was bathed in golden light, and hundreds of people were watching her every move. She sat down on the bench. She placed her hands on the keys. And for a moment, she froze. Her mind went blank. She could not remember the first note. She could not remember anything. The faces in the crowd blurred together. The whispers grew louder. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted in their seat impatiently. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about her mother. The way she used to cry when Elena played. The way she would say, "Mija, you have a gift from God. Never let anyone take it from you." But they did take it, Elena thought. Life took it. Poverty took it. Fear took it. And then another voice spoke in her mind. A quieter voice. Her own voice. "No. You let it go. And now you can take it back." Her fingers pressed the first key. The note rang out through the hall, clear and pure. Then another note followed, and another. The melody began to build, soft at first, like a whisper. Like a secret being shared between old friends. Elena played. She did not think about the audience. She did not think about the whispers or the doubt, or the man who had smirked at her from the front row. She thought only about the music, about the way it moved through her body like electricity, about the way it connected her to everyone she had ever loved and lost. The piece grew more complex. Her fingers danced across the keys with a speed and precision that surprised even her. Years of silence had not dulled her skill. If anything, they had sharpened it. All those nights sitting alone in the dark, touching the keys without playing, her hands had been remembering, waiting, preparing for this moment. The music swelled and filled every corner of the room. It bounced off the crystal chandeliers and wrapped around the velvet curtains and sank into the hearts of everyone listening. Elena poured everything into it. Every tear she had cried. Every dream she had buried. Every moment of invisibility and loneliness, and quiet desperation. She played like her life depended on it, because in a way, it did. When the final note faded into silence, Elena kept her hands on the keys. She was afraid to open her eyes. Afraid to see the faces in the crowd. Afraid that none of this had been real. That she would wake up and find herself back in her gray uniform, pushing her cart down an empty hallway. The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, and then the room exploded. The applause hit Elena like a wave. It crashed over her, loud and overwhelming, filling the entire hall with thunder. She opened her eyes and saw something she never expected to see. People were standing. Not just a few people. Everyone. Every single person in that room had risen to their feet. They were clapping so hard that their hands must have hurt. Some of them were wiping tears from their cheeks. Others had their mouths open in disbelief. The man in the front row who had smirked at her earlier was now staring at her like he had just witnessed a miracle. Elena sat frozen on the piano bench. She did not know what to do. She did not know how to react. For 15 years, she had been invisible. For 15 years, nobody had looked at her twice, and now 200 strangers were giving her a standing ovation like she was some kind of star. The applause went on and on. It seemed to have no end. Every time it started to fade, someone would clap louder, and it would build back up again. Elena's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She felt like she might float away, or fall apart, or both at the same time. Finally, she managed to stand. Her legs felt weak beneath her. She gave a small bow, the kind she remembered from her training days in Venezuela. The applause grew even louder. Someone in the back shouted bravo. Someone else whistled. The sound filled Elena's ears until she could not hear anything else. She walked off the stage in a daze. The moment she stepped behind the curtain, her knees gave out. She grabbed onto a nearby railing to keep herself from falling. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Tears streamed down her face. But she was smiling. She was laughing and crying at the same time. And she could not stop doing either. Dr. Chen appeared beside her. The director's eyes were red and wet. She did not say anything at first. She just pulled Elena into a tight hug and held her there for a long moment. "You did it," Dr. Chen whispered. "You showed them." Elena could not speak. She just nodded against Dr. Chen's shoulder and let the tears keep coming. The next hour was a blur. People swarmed around Elena the moment she stepped back into the main hall. Donors in expensive suits shook her hand and told her she was extraordinary. Professors who had never looked at her before now could not stop staring. Students crowded around her, asking questions about her technique, her training, her story. One woman in a silver dress pressed a business card into Elena's palm. "I am a concert promoter," she said. "Please call me. I would love to discuss opportunities with you." A man with gray hair and kind eyes introduced himself as a music critic for a major newspaper. "I have been covering classical music for 30 years, he said. "I have never heard anything quite like what you just did. Would you be willing to do an interview?" Elena nodded and smiled and shook more hands than she could count. Her head was spinning. This could not be real. Things like this did not happen to people like her. People like her stayed invisible. People like her pushed carts and mopped floors and disappeared into the background. But here she was, surrounded by strangers who wanted to know her name. At some point during the chaos, Elena noticed a small group standing near the back of the room. They were not dressed like the other guests. No tuxedos or gowns. Just simple clothes. Clean but worn. Elena recognized them immediately. They were her co-workers, the other janitors and cleaning staff from the conservatory. They had come to support her. Elena excused herself from the crowd and walked toward them. There were 5 of them in total. Rosa, the older woman who worked the morning shift. Victor, the quiet man who cleaned the bathrooms. A young woman named Gloria, who had only been at the conservatory for a few months. And 2 others whose names Elena was embarrassed to admit she had forgotten. They all looked nervous, like they were not sure if they were allowed to be there. But when Elena reached them, Rosa stepped forward and grabbed her hands. "Mija," Rosa said, her voice thick with emotion. "We had no idea. All these years, we had no idea." Elena squeezed her hands. "I never told anyone. I was too scared." Victor shook his head slowly. "You have nothing to be scared of. Not anymore. You hear how they clapped for you? You belong on that stage." Gloria was crying openly. "I want to be like you," she said. "I want to believe that my dreams are not dead. That maybe someday, someone will see me too." Elena pulled her into a hug. "They will," she whispered. "I promise you, they will. You just have to keep believing, even when it feels impossible." The group stayed with her for a few more minutes, laughing and crying and celebrating together. These were the people who understood her life. The early mornings, the aching backs, the feeling of being invisible in a world that did not care. They had watched her push her cart through those hallways for years, never knowing the secret she carried inside. Now they knew, and they were proud of her. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, and the hall had grown quiet, Elena found herself alone near the stage. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but she could not bring herself to leave. This place had been her sanctuary for so long, the site of her secret grief and her silent hope. And now it was something else. It was the place where her life had changed forever. She heard footsteps behind her, soft and hesitant. She turned and saw the young student who had discovered her in the practice room that night, the one who had told Dr. Chen about her talent, the one who had planted the seed that led to all of this. He walked toward her slowly, his hands in his pockets. He looked almost shy, which seemed strange for someone so young and talented. "I just wanted to say congratulations," he said. "You were incredible, even better than I expected." Elena smiled at him. "Thank you. For everything. If you had not heard me that night, none of this would have happened." He shrugged. "I just told the truth. You did the hard part." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the empty stage. The grand piano still sat under the spotlight, waiting for its next performer. "Can I ask you something?" the young man said. "Of course." He hesitated, then spoke. "Why did you stop? I mean, before. Why did you give up music for so long?" Elena thought about the question. She had asked herself the same thing 1,000 times. Why had she let the years slip away? Why had she allowed fear to bury her gift so deep that even she forgot it was there? "I thought my story was over," she said finally. "When I left Venezuela, when my family struggled, when I started cleaning floors instead of playing concerts, I thought that was the end. I thought the universe had decided I was not meant for music, so I stopped trying." The young man nodded slowly. "And now?" Elena looked at the piano. The light caught its polished surface, making it glow like something from a dream. "Now I know that stories do not end until we decide they end," she said. "I gave up on myself. But tonight, I took myself back." The young man smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "I hope I remember that," he said, "if I ever feel like giving up." Elena turned to face him fully. "You will feel like giving up. Everyone does. The trick is to keep a small piece of hope alive, even in the darkest moments, even if it is just one note on a piano in an empty room. That is enough. That is how you survive." He nodded again, and Elena could see something shift in his eyes, like he was storing her words somewhere safe, somewhere he could find them later when he needed them most. They said goodnight and parted ways. Elena walked out of the conservatory and stepped into the cold night air. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like tiny promises. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, She did not know if the concert promoter would call, or if the newspaper would run a story, or if any of this would lead to anything lasting. But for the first time in 18 years, she was not afraid of the future. She had played her song. The world had listened. And that was enough. Or so she thought. Because Elena did not yet realize that her story was only just beginning. Elena woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it with sleepy eyes, expecting maybe a message from one of her coworkers or a reminder about a bill she needed to pay. What she found instead made her sit straight up in bed. 47 missed calls, over 200 text messages, and notifications from apps she barely knew how to use. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the messages. Most of them were from numbers she did not recognize. Some were from old friends she had not spoken to in years. A few were from family members back in Venezuela who she had lost touch with long ago. What is happening? She thought. What in the world is happening? She opened one of the apps and found her answer. Someone at the gala had recorded her performance on their phone. They had posted it online the night before, with a simple caption, "Cleaning Lady Stuns Elite Music School with Breathtaking Piano Performance." The video had gone viral. Elena watched the view count climb in real time. 10 million, 11 million, 12 million. By the time she finished her morning coffee, it had passed 15 million and showed no signs of slowing down. News outlets started calling. First the local stations, then the national ones. A reporter from a major network left a voicemail asking if Elena would be willing to appear on their morning show. A producer from a famous talk show sent an email requesting an interview. A journalist from Venezuela reached out, saying that Elena's story was being celebrated across the entire country. The conservatory's phone lines were jammed with calls. Dr. Chen had to hire extra staff just to handle the flood of inquiries. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who is this woman? Where did she come from? How did a janitor learn to play like that? Elena did not know how to handle any of it. She had spent 15 years avoiding attention, and now the whole world was looking at her. It felt like standing in the middle of a hurricane. Everything was spinning, and she could not find solid ground. But slowly, with the help of Dr. Chen and a few trusted friends, she began to find her footing. The offers poured in. Recording contracts. Performance invitations. A famous orchestra wanted her to be their guest soloist. A music festival in Europe invited her to headline their summer program. A billionaire offered to sponsor a world tour. The numbers people mentioned were staggering. More money than Elena had earned in her entire life combined. She turned most of them down. People could not understand it. Why would she say no to fame and fortune? Why would she walk away from opportunities that most musicians only dream about? But Elena knew something that the rest of the world did not understand. She had not played that night for money. She had not played for fame. She had played because the music was a part of her soul that had been locked away for too long. And now that it was free again, she wanted to use it in a way that mattered, not just to her, but to others who felt invisible too. So instead of signing record deals, Elena did something different. She went back to the conservatory, not as a janitor this time. Dr. Chen offered her a position as a guest instructor, teaching master classes in classical piano technique. Elena accepted. The first day she walked into that classroom, she almost could not believe it. The same hallways she had mopped for 15 years now welcomed her as a teacher. The same students who had never looked at her before now sat in rows, notebooks open, waiting to learn from her. The same professors who had treated her like furniture now greeted her with respect and admiration. It was strange. It was wonderful. It was terrifying. But Elena showed up every single day. And she gave everything she had. Her classes were different from the others at the conservatory. She did not focus only on technique and theory. She talked about life. She talked about struggle. She talked about what it means to lose everything and still find a way to keep going. Her students listened with wide eyes, and many of them told her later that she had changed the way they thought about music. But Elena did not stop there. She started performing charity concerts on weekends, small events at community centers and churches, mostly for immigrant families who were struggling the way her own family had struggled years ago. She played for people who had never been inside a concert hall, people who worked long hours and came home exhausted, people who felt invisible in a world that did not seem to notice them. After each concert, Elena would stay and talk with the audience. She would shake hands and hug strangers and listen to their stories. Many of them cried when they spoke to her. They told her that her music made them feel seen, that her story gave them hope, that if she could find her way back to her dreams after all these years, maybe they could too. Those conversations meant more to Elena than any standing ovation ever could. Months passed. The viral video eventually faded from the headlines, replaced by newer stories and fresher scandals. The phone calls slowed down. The interview requests stopped coming. The world moved on, the way it always does, but Elena's life had changed forever. She still lived in the same small apartment. She still cooked the same simple meals and watched the same television shows before bed. But now there was music in her life again. Real music, the kind that filled her heart and spilled out through her fingers every time she touched a piano. She thought about her mother often, about the way she used to sit in the corner of their little living room in Caracas and cry happy tears whenever Elena played. Sometimes, late at night, Elena would sit at her small keyboard and play Liebestrom, and she could almost feel her mother's presence in the room, like she was watching from somewhere beyond, smiling down at her daughter. "You did it, mija," Elena imagined her saying. "You finally did it." One evening, about a year after the gala, Elena was cleaning her apartment when she came across an old photograph. It was buried in a box she had not opened in years. The picture showed a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, sitting at a grand piano in a beautiful concert hall. She was smiling at the camera like she owned the world. Elena stared at the photograph for a long time. That young woman felt like a stranger, someone from another life, another universe. But she also felt familiar, like an old friend who had been waiting patiently for Elena to remember her. She placed the photograph on her nightstand, where she could see it every morning when she woke up, a reminder of who she had been and who she had become. Elena never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the years of pushing carts and scrubbing floors. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. But she also never forgot what it felt like to sit at that piano on the night of the gala and play her heart out for a room full of strangers. That moment had taught her something important, something she carried with her for the rest of her life. It is never too late. No matter how old you are, no matter how many years have passed, no matter how deeply you have buried your dreams, it is never too late to take them back. The world will try to convince you otherwise. It will tell you that you are too old, too tired, too forgotten. But the world is wrong. Your story is not over until you decide it is over. And Elena's story was just getting started. She had spent 15 years being invisible. Now she spent the rest of her life making sure others felt seen. And every time she sat down at a piano, she played not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told they were not good enough. Every person who had ever felt small, every person who had ever given up on their dreams. She played for all of them, and the music never stopped.